Did you know that in Duel Links there are cards that everyone uses in their decks? Of course you did, because you use them too. But let's go over the top 15 cards / tech cards that almost everyone runs and I feel like are the best. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Game Panda. Today we are playing some more Yu-Gi-Oh Duel Links, and as you guys saw in the intro, we are going over the top 15 tech cards. So Dark Signer Kallen Kessler has absolutely nothing to do with what we're doing. This deck has absolutely nothing to do with what we're doing, but we are going over tech cards. Now, before we get into the list, let me go ahead and explain to you guys what I think tech cards are. Now, in my opinion, tech cards are cards, specifically spell and trap cards, that you can use in almost any deck. In most situations, they aren't super situational. They can fit in any situation. Obviously, they have requirements to be activated, which can affect where they rank in my rankings. And of course, because this is a ranking video, it's 100% my opinion. So feel free in the comments below to disagree with me. And if you do disagree with me, don't just say, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? Why didn't you do this? If you have a reasoning, please place it, because I want to see. I want to know what the community thinks, why you guys think something is better or worse, or maybe it should be on this list, maybe something super underrated. I don't know, maybe you think Mystical Moon is a tech card and should be on the top 15. I don't know. You guys might be weird like that. I'm kidding, you're not weird. But let's go ahead and get into the top 15. Coming in at number 15, guys, we have Paleozoic Canadia. Now, hear me out. I can already see so many of you going to the comments typing, what are you doing? Canadia is such a good card. Yes, I know Canadia is a good card, but hear me out, okay? So, if you don't know what Canadia is, right down the middle, this is what it looks like. Off to the side, that's what it does. You can read it. Now, I'm going to go over the basics real quick. So, first off, you're targeting a face-up monster that your opponent controls. You're going to basically put that face-down defense position. That's a Book of Moon. Very simple, but in trap formation. Now, Canadia also has a second effect where it can summon itself from the graveyard as a monster and does not act as a normal trap card, but you can only summon it if a chain occurs. Now, here's why it's good. It's a Book of Moon. Essentially, you can play 3 Book of Moons and then 3 Canadia, and you have 6 Book of Moons that can negate effects or anything like that. That's fantastic. It negates monster effects. It stops chains from happening. And by chains, I don't mean like Yu-Gi-Oh chains. I mean chains as in summoning multiple monsters, getting the ace out very quickly, and spamming the field. It's very good at stopping that. However, it targets. There are so many monsters that cannot be targeted now that are being played. It's very, very annoying to deal with. So targeting is, of course, going to lower its standings. And number 2 is that to actually activate its second effect, which isn't the main effect. I get it, that's not the main effect. You're not using it to summon itself, but it's part of the card, so you have to look at it. To summon the monster part of it, you have to chain. You have to have a chain going, whether it be your chain, your opponent's chain, whatever. And I just don't like the idea of forcing a chain just to summon Canadia. I don't know, not a big fan of Canadia. That's just personal preference. Obviously, Canadia does have a lot of benefits, but I see it as the number 15. Still top 15, still one of the best in the game, just not the best of the best. Coming in at number 14, we have a card that I've literally never heard of or never seen in the game. And you might be wondering, why are you putting it in your top 15 if you've never heard of it? Hear me out. I like it quite a bit. It negates your opponent's effects, right? So you're going to target a special summoned monster, you're going to negate its effects, then you're going to cut its HP in half, and then it gets sent to the graveyard. But then if your opponent special summons another monster, you can go ahead and bring it back onto the field and activate it again. Now, the reason why I really like this card is because it's only for special summoned monsters, and almost everything nowadays is special summoned. Look at any deck, even my level up deck. Look at my level up deck, alright? We go to Hammer Shark, we are special summoning one level 3 or lower water monster. We are special summoning in almost every deck. So being able to negate effects of special summon monsters, which are usually the ace cards or used to help bring out the ace cards, if we're able to negate their effects, that's a huge bonus. And then on top of that, not only do we get to use this card once, we get to use it twice. So if you have 3 copies of this thing, you're able to use its effect 6 times for only 3 cards, which is a huge bonus. Again, there are obviously negatives. One being that it's a target, which honestly isn't the biggest because there are so many cards that target. But 2, it's only for special summon monsters. Now, of course, special summon monsters are everywhere, like I said, but not being able to use its effect on non-special summon monsters might be a hindrance. I don't really know. I would have to use this card and I haven't. Obviously, you can see that I don't have any. And that's another thing. The reason why nobody has this card is because it only comes from one place. Selection Mini Box 5, which is unavailable. And of course, you know how I feel about selection boxes. I hate them. They're 100% anti-free to play. It's just waste of time, gems. It's like money. It's like throwing money down the toilet. Like, okay, it's not good. But this selection box not being available makes it so that a whole bunch of people don't have access to the card, and they probably never will because selection box 5 won't come back. So availability is a major downside for this card. And then on top of that, it's a limit 3. I mean, there's so many cards that are limit 3s, so that, especially other tech cards, there are other tech cards that are limit 3. Your deck probably has a bunch of limit 3s in there. Well, not a bunch, probably like 1 or 2, because it's obviously limited. But you won't be able to run 3 copies of this and have 6 effects. You're most likely only going to be running 1 copy of this and only having 2 effects, which I mean is still good for 1 card, but I don't know. I don't really find it at a top tier tech card. Coming in at number 13, we have Ring of Destruction. Ring of Destruction essentially lets you target a face-up monster whose attack is less than their life points. So if they have 4,000 life points, you can target any monster that has 4,000 or less life points. Now, you then get to target that monster, destroy it, but then you take half of its original attack as life point damage. So let's say the monster is a Blue Eyes, very typical monster there. 3,000 attack points, or you lose 1,500. Now 1,500 is not a crazy amount of life points, right? It's less than half. But I mean, it's still a sizable amount, you know? It's more than a third of your life points. So that's kind of, it's very high risk, high reward kind of thing, where if you use this to get rid of a monster and it can stall your opponent out, then that's a huge benefit. But if it doesn't and your opponent can just easily replace it or can use their graveyard or something like that, then I mean, it's very iffy, right? Because then you just took a bunch of damage for no reason. Now being able to get rid of a really strong monster is also a benefit, because now you can either clear your opponent's field with this and get a direct attack off. You can destroy a monster whose effects would activate or something like that, and then maybe, like I said, stall your opponent. Ring of Destruction is very hit or miss, high risk, high reward, so use it with a bit of caution. Coming in at number 12, we have Ballista Squad. Now, there are 2 ways you can use Ballista Squad. One being that you're down, your opponent has their ace monster out there, it's really strong. You just have 1 monster in your hand that's basically going to be face down defense position, so you don't take any damage. It's complete fodder, not going to help you at all. Place down, you have this card in your set position. You place your monster in attack position. They attack you. You then activate Ballista Squad. You contribute your monster, and then their monster gets destroyed. Now, this can also be very helpful in the fact that you don't have to only get rid of monsters. It just says target one card your opponent controls. So this can be a spell or trap card, this can be a monster card, fields play, whatever. Anything that's on the field, you can destroy it. That's a big benefit. And then on top of that, if you can use this properly, where your monster benefits from going into the graveyard or your deck benefits from having monsters in the graveyard, this is a massive boost to that deck, because you are not only taking your monster that needs to be in the graveyard to the graveyard for free, essentially, you are also getting rid of a card that could potentially stop you and maybe stall out your opponent's plans for one extra turn. That's really good. If you can use this perfectly or use it properly, this can be one of the best cards in the deck and can really help you launch, no pun intended, your attacks and get your ace monster out there. Now, the reason why it's not in the top 10 is because it's situational, right? You need to have a deck that has to have such and such monsters that allow cards to be in the graveyard and that benefits you. Your opponent also needs to have a card that's worthy of you getting rid of. Obviously, that's like the least important part of it, but like I said at the beginning, I consider a tech card to be able to be used in every single deck. So the best way of using Ballista Squad isn't necessarily the best for every deck, but is good in a defensive standpoint where you can still get rid of an opponent's really strong monster to help you, or you can get rid of a trap card that you know is going to hurt you. It's not the best in the way that it's not meant to be played, obviously, right? That's why it's sitting in number 12 and not in the top 10. Speaking of tech cards not being able to be used in every single situation, we have Darkhole. Darkhole, again, has two uses. One, you are down, your opponent has spammed the field, they got all these strong monsters out there, and you really just need a reset. Go ahead, play Darkhole. All the monster zones get wiped. You are free to play a monster and attack directly. Maybe change the tide of the duel, whatever it is. Second way, it's turn 2. Your opponent went first. And a lot of times when your opponent goes first, on your first turn, you want to get your aces out there. You want to get your strongest monsters going. You want to set your field up. You activate Darkhole, all that goes away. All the monsters go away. You can start setting up and attack your opponent directly, essentially on the first turn. Now, of course, there has to be downsides. One, it only clears monsters. Therefore, you're not going to be getting rid of your opponent's spell cards, so they can easily have something that counters this. They can easily have a trap card or a spell card that can stop you from starting up, so then essentially nothing happened. And two, this card would benefit so much from being a quick play spell card, because if you could set it your first turn and then let your opponent go off and then activate it, that would be insane. Now, obviously, it not being a quick play spell card doesn't necessarily take away from what it is. It's taking away from what it could be, but I feel like the other ones above it are slightly better. So that's not a knock on Darkhole, it's just that the other ones are better. Now, before we get into the top 10, obviously you've watched this far, so that means you must like the video, or like me enough to actually listen to me talk here. Why not show me that you liked the video by leaving a like? I feel like I kind of deserve that. Put a lot of research into this episode. I would really appreciate it. Thank you. We are now in the top 10. Number 10, Crackdown. Alright, hear me out. Crackdown is used in a lot of decks, alright? Really good decks too, such as Live Twins, Yubel, Luster Soldier decks. Those are currently some of the top decks right now. So obviously that means this card must have some use, right? Of course it does. You're basically going to be able to take control of one of your opponent's monsters. However, it can't attack and it can't activate its effects. This isn't an issue because Crackdown is really just used to take control of your opponent's monster, a monster that you might need or want in order to stop them, and at the same time, you can use it to maybe Xyz summon, Synchro summon, Tribute summon, Fusion summon, whatever it is. You can use that monster to summon a better monster. And on top of that, not only are you getting set up, you stopped your opponent from continuing their plan, which is massive. Disruption is one of the biggest attributes for a good tech card, alright? Now, of course, this has drawbacks. One being that if you don't have a situation where you need just one thing or that certain monster that your opponent has out there, and you activate this card, you just kind of wasted a space because now it can't do anything. It's really only there for attributing, and the chances of it staying there are kind of low. So you really want to use it immediately. Use that monster that you took immediately. Otherwise, it's just going to be a hindrance to you. So that is one downside. Another one, it's a continuous trap card. I don't like continuous spell or trap cards really, because those are keen targets for MST, Cyclone, Galaxy Cyclone, all those things. Like, those are really big targets. So if you can't use the monster right away, the trap card kind of just stays there on your field, using up a monster zone and a spell zone. Not that good, because now you're limited to only 2 monster and 2 spell, which is not that much, especially when there's so many cards that you need to play in your deck. But that's the main reason why not higher up, but it still cracked the top 10. Get it? Cracked the top 10. Alright, coming in at number 9, we got the tried and true Polymerization. You guys know that Polymerization is a really good card when I have it favorited. If you look at my favorites, let's just take a quick look at my favorites. They're all tech cards. All of them are tech cards. And Polymerization is favorited. That means I can use it in almost any deck that I want. There are so many decks out there that require fusion monsters or have really good fusion cards, and there are really good fusion monsters that can basically be used in almost any deck. So being able to fusion summon them is very important. That's where Polymerization comes in. And Polymerization is so generic that it has so many cards that it can be searched with. So not only can you use Polymerization in almost every deck, you can get it fairly easy in almost every single deck. It can be searched for. It's a great card all around. And really, the only downside is that it doesn't do anything itself. It just sets you up a little bit more for another card that really helps you. It's not something that would change the tide of the duel, potentially, because it could also be a dead card if you don't have the correct stuff to fusion summon. So, but it still made the top 10. Coming in at number 8, we got, again, a very tried and true card. We got Monster Reborn. Monster Reborn is a card that does what it says. Your monster from a graveyard comes back to life.
Wow.
Now, the big thing here is that a graveyard. So that means it can be your opponent's graveyard. It could be your graveyard. So if it's your graveyard, you can use it to bring back your ace monster, or a monster that would help you bring out your ace card. If it's your opponent's graveyard, you can stop them from using its effect in the graveyard. You can stop them from using or bringing back their own ace card. You can do so many things with getting rid of cards in your opponent's graveyards. It's very helpful, but the main thing against it is that there's only one in the entire game. There's only one way of getting it. Lifetime mission rewards, which means you only get one copy, and it's also limited to one, so you can't use it with other cards that are limited to one. So that's kind of an issue with compatibility, obviously. But I mean, who doesn't want a card that sparkles like that? Just look at that thing. Coming in at number 7, we have Forbidden Lance. Forbidden Lance is very situational, but it ranks high, even though these other ones such as Ballista Squad, Darkhole, Crackdown are a little bit lower than it despite being situational. So like the other situational cards, there are 2 reasons why you use Forbidden Lance. 1, your opponent is super strong, and lowering its attack by 800 would make it so that way it gets destroyed by your monster, or helps you take less life point damage to lose or something like that. So you can use it defensively. You can also use it offensively. If your monster is, let's say, your opponent has a clear field, which almost never happens, you can activate Forbidden Lance. Now, your opponent cannot activate trap cards or anything like that, because Forbidden Lance stops that. So, your opponent can't activate trap cards, you attack, you win, woohoo, fireworks go off, you're king of games, let's go. Obviously, that's a more dramatic situation, but like, it can stop your opponent from using trap cards, And if you have less than 800, if you lose 800 attack points, 800's kind of a lot, but at the same time, it's not like an incredible amount. So if your monster has a decent amount of attack points, 800 is not really going to hinder it too much. So it could be beneficial to play that. But the main reason why it's up here is that it's a quick play spell cards. If you guys know anything about Duel Links, you know that quick play spell cards are king. Quick play spell cards are like your best friend. You can activate them during your opponent's turn. They're like trap cards, but have the benefits of being spell. Really, that's the main reason why it's higher than the other cards that are very situational. Coming in at number 6, we have Bottomless Trap Hole. Now, Bottomless Trap Hole, basically, whenever your opponent summons a monster that has 1500 or more attack points, you can go ahead and basically destroy it and banish it. Now, this is really good because there's a lot of monsters, especially the ones that are special summoned, usually have more than 1500 attack points. So that just means that you can go ahead and get rid of it. Bye bye, gone, no more advantage you. Alright, gone. Now really there's no downside to this except that you can't use it whenever you want. You can only use it whenever your opponent summons a monster, and the 1500 attack points isn't really that big of a hindrance because most monsters that you really want to get rid of have more than 1500 attack points. Realistically, unless they're a setup monster, which usually if they're a setup monster, they're setting up for a bigger monster, which you can easily get rid of because most likely they have more than 1500 attack points. We are now in the top 5. So what that means that these are the cards everyone should have no matter what. Ignore the fact that I don't have any because I can see you looking at the side of the screen and seeing that I don't have a single Cosmic Cyclone. But nobody said I was a good Duel Links player, so therefore it doesn't apply to me. But of course, you're a good Duel Links player, so therefore you have a Galaxy Cyclone already, but you might not be using it, and this is why you should be using it. 1, you get to remove back row. Back row is massive right now. Everyone has stacked back rows. Everyone's trying to get rid of back row. Everyone's using their back rows to help set up. It's huge. So getting rid of back row is massive. And on top of that, you not only get rid of the spell and trap card from the field, you get to banish it. That means if your opponent has a spell card that benefits from being in the graveyard, it doesn't get that benefit anymore. If your opponent is able to grab that spell or trap card back from the graveyard, they can't do that anymore because it's banished. On top of that, this is a quick play spell card, so you can activate it during your opponent's turn. They immediately set a card. Oh, nope, no, you don't. Goodbye. See you later. Disruption happens, and like I said earlier, disruption is massive. Now, of course, you can't have a card this crazy without having a massive setback. And that massive setback is 1000 life points. Now, I mentioned this with Ring of Destruction. I don't like losing life points. I like my 4000. This is not Master Duel where you get, what, like 8000? I think Master Duel has 8000. It's not like that where you can willy-nilly give up 1000. 1000 is a fourth of your life points. That's a lot. You can now get one shot by a monster without any bonuses, boosts, or anything like that. You can lose to a Blue Eyes deck right then and there. And if you would have asked me a few months ago if I would have ranked this in the top 5, I definitely would have said no because it's so hard to get. It used to only come from one box, Galactic Origin. But now, because those token things have been added to the card trader, you can easily get one for 100 tokens, or those card tokens, these rainbow ones. Box chips, they're called box chips, I'm sorry. You can get Cosmic Cyclone fairly easily. And now that the box chips don't expire, you can get 3. Very simple. But I will still probably not have a Galaxy Cyclone by the time you're watching this. Coming in at number 4, we go back to my favorites tab. And like I said earlier, my favorites tab is very exclusive. It's VIP. Not really VIP, it's more a VIC. It's a VIC. Alright. Enemy Controller is a VIC. Very important card. Now, before Enemy Controller got hit with the ban list, it used to be so good. So good. At 3 copies of this thing? Insane. 1. It's a quick play spell card. You will notice that most of the cards in the top 5 are quick play spell cards. Wow, that should tell you quick play spell cards are huge. 2. This thing has multiple uses. It can be used in offense and defense. How many cards can you say have offensive and defensive capabilities? Not many. Obviously the ones in the top 5 do. But enemy controller, you can change the battle position of one of your opponents. This is where that effect takes place. Usage number 1. Your opponent has a super strong monster, and most of the time super strong monsters don't have that good of a defense. So their attack is really high, their defense is kind of low, so you can go ahead, change it to defense position, attack that monster, get rid of it, gone. Second way, your opponent has a monster that doesn't have good attack. Might have good defense, might just be a setup card, whatever it is. It doesn't have good attack, you switch it to attack position, you attack, you deal damage. It's great, it's fun, fantastic. The second effect is that you can tribute a monster to then take control of one of their monsters for 1 turn. This can be used to clear your opponent's field. Your opponent might have only 1 monster. You take that monster, and now you can use it to attack your opponent. And then on top of that, like I said with Ballista Squad, if you have a monster that can be tributed and that wants to be tributed or wants to be in the graveyard, go ahead and use that monster. And even if you don't fully take advantage of taking control of an opponent's monster, you still could have dealt some damage, done something to disrupt, or even just helped yourself, which is huge. So enemy controller, 2 different effects which can be used multiple ways. All right, who doesn't want that? Enemy controller, fantastic. The only thing going against it is that it's limit 1. There's a lot of good cards that are limit 1, so you know, obviously we mentioned one, Monster Reborn, earlier. Enemy controller, maybe even Mirror Force, but you can't use that enemy controller with those cards. And you could also have some monsters that are important to your deck that you wouldn't be able to use enemy controller with. So that's the reason why it's not in the top 3, but it's still a really good card. And almost everyone has it because of how easy it is to obtain. We have now entered the top 3. Now, coming in at number 3, we have Warning Point, alright? Warning Point is essentially a trap version of Book of Moon. So you have an opponent's monster that doesn't need to be targeted. So this is one of the very good cards that don't target. So you can select a monster that is summoned. Of course, it has to be just summoned this turn, not any other turn. And this card only lasts for 1 turn as well, so keep that in mind when you're using it. But essentially, it can't attack, its effects are negated, and it can't be used to special summon fusion, synchro, exceeds, or linked monsters. That is huge because most of the time the setup monsters are used to bring out the link, exceeds, synchro, and fusion monsters, right? So if those are out on the field, you activate Warning Point, they can't do that anymore. You've disrupted your opponent. Good job. Congratulations. Tech card achieved its purpose. Now, of course, the downside is that it can only be used on a monster that was just summoned, and it's only for 1 turn, which I mean, you can't expect this to last forever. It's not Fiendish Chain out here, but I personally find this essentially another Book of Moon, just the trap version. Speaking of Book of Moon, here it is, number 2. I've been talking about it essentially the whole video. And since you guys see number 2, you guys can probably guess what number 1 is. But just in case if you can't, I'm going to save it. So, Book of Moon, very good. That's essentially all I have to say. But I'll give more detail. So, Book of Moon is a quick play spell card. Hint, hint, quick play. Very good. Okay, it also does the same thing as Warning Point, essentially. It stops your opponent from using that monster for 1 turn. So the opponent's monster goes face down, defense position, that stops its effects from being activated, that stops your opponent from using it for fusion, synchro, whatever, exceeds, link, all that stoof. So honestly, it's just a good card. I really can't find any faults in it except for the fact that it only lasts for 1 turn. It doesn't permanently keep your opponent face down like Floodgate Trap Hole, so there's that. But I mean, it's still really good because then it stops your opponent's monster is face down. You can bring in your monster your next turn, destroy it. They don't have a plan anymore. Have copies of Book of Moon. Don't be like me have copies of Book of Moon. And if you couldn't guess it, our number 1 is Mystical Space Typhoon, MST. Very good. Like I said with Cosmic Cyclone, getting rid of back row is huge. And MST is essentially Galaxy Cyclone without the life point cost. So I really like that. However, the only downside is that it sends the spell and trap card to the graveyard and not banishing it. So if your opponent happens to be playing a deck that wants spell and trap cards in the graveyard, you just help them, or they might have to spend a card to grab that spell and trap card back, which honestly is not that big of a deal because you just let them waste a card, and it's a quick play spell card. Woohoo, we love quick play. Quick play is so good, I love it, so good. But yeah, if you don't have 3 copies of this and you don't have anything to build towards, I recommend trying to get 3 MSTs. I only have 2 because I have stuff I'm building towards, because you guys require a deck every so often. And by every so often, I mean bi-weekly, which is a lot. You guys are putting a lot of pressure on me over here. Forget about my worries and my woes. MST, in my opinion, the best tech card in Duel Links. Now, obviously, these aren't all the tech cards. I didn't even touch on any defensive trap cards like Mirror Force, Drowning Mirror Force, Draining Shield, Wall Disruption. I didn't talk about any of those because I don't consider those as tech cards. I consider those as defensive cards. So if you want to see a list of defensive cards, let me know, because I would be happy to do that. Because a little secret between you and me, I don't have enough gems to get enough cards. That's very hard to build decks with free-to-play players. But that's gonna go ahead and end off the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you guys leave a like, subscribe, turn on those post notifications, and let me know down in the comments below. Do you agree with my list? Like that's a genuine question. Do you guys agree with it? Are there cards that you feel like were misjudged, should have been lower, should have been higher? Some cards that got completely skipped over and weren't even added on the list. What would your top 10 look like? How about that? What does your top 10 look like? Let me know down in the comments below. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.